This video lesson is on solving one-step inequalities. Don't forget, if you divide or multiply by a negative number when you're solving, you have to flip the inequality sign. So again, just some important things to remember. Again, if you divide or multiply by a negative number, flip the inequality sign. When you're graphing, if you have less than or equal to, or if you have greater than or equal to, you're going to graph with a closed circle. If you have less than or greater than, you're going to graph with an open circle. So for a closed circle, we're going to shade it in. For an open circle, it will just be open and empty. So if we're looking at example 1, w plus 2 is greater than or equal to 4. I'm just going to solve like I would for an equation for w. So I'm going to get rid of the 2 by subtracting, and I'm going to have w is greater than or equal to 2. Now when I graph this, I'm going to want to use a closed circle because my sign is greater than or equal to, which means that it's going to include 2 because it could be 2 or anything greater. So when I create my graph, if I start at 0, I'm going to make my closed circle on the 2 and my arrow going in the direction that would include anything that was greater than or equal to the number 2. So we want to be inclusive or include the number 2 because greater than or equal to could be 2 or anything greater. Now when we're looking at subtraction problems, it's going to be very similar. So looking at example 3, we're going to add 3 to both sides. So h is less than 10. And when we graph it, we're going to graph with an open circle because it's not going to include 10. So it's got to be less than 10. So when I graph this, I'm going to graph my open circle on the 10, and my arrow is going to include anything that was less than 10. Notice that this time it does not include the 10. It's open because it does not include the number 10. Because it can't be less than 10 if it equals 10. Now looking at multiplication, we're actually going to do example 6 instead of example 5 first. So when we look at this, I know that I want to get the a by itself, so I'm going to have to divide both sides by -6. But because I divided by a negative number, I have to flip my inequality sign. So I still cancel everything out and divide like I normally would, only I have to flip that inequality sign in my answer. Again, when I graph it, I'm going to have an open circle because it's not going to include 4. So when I graph this on the number line, I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, an open circle on 4, and my arrow is going to include anything that is less than 4. And last but not least, one-step inequalities with division. So looking at example 7, I'm going to solve this like normal. I'm going to multiply by 9 on both sides. So I'm going to end up with m is less than 90. And the reason I'm not flipping the sign here is because I multiplied by a positive number, not a negative number. But because I have a non-inclusive sign, I'm still going to use an open circle. So if I were to do this by 5s, and you certainly could just still count by 1s if you wanted to. I'm going to have an open circle on 90, and I'm going to include everything that is less than 90. And you want to be careful that you're not just paying attention to the direction of your inequality sign, because if this was written like this, then you would be going in the wrong direction. You always want to make sure that you're really paying attention to why your arrow is going in a certain direction. I know that this means less than, so I know that M has to be something that's less than 90. So I wouldn't want to include anything over here because that wouldn't make the inequality true. All of those numbers are greater than 90. So don't get caught up in an old trick that may have been taught to you in the past.